why did I choose that? So in looking at a business, I have done startups from nothing, 6 months with no revenue coming in. It had cash flow, which was great. It had reputation.
Plumbing and drain cleaning isn't the first thing people associate, obviously, with a former engineer, a sales leader. You talked about what you got from Roto-Rooter, but where do you see the industry going? Where do you see Roto-Rooter going that makes you want to continue to invest in what you're doing?
Looking at what our customers' problems are, and then how can we provide something that meets them. The great thing about that is that I'm not competing with any of those. And we all have the same problems. It's different state, different, maybe, different outlook, but we're all facing the same problems.
A lot of people, when they think about the plumbing industry, they think about the water restoration industry, they think about, you don't have to worry about the dollar. You don't have to worry about oil. You don't have to worry about the economy quite as much. They call it recession proof. Do you still think that's the case? Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Violin's GPS podcast, Growing Professional Skills. I am your host, Jeff Jones, Violin Director of Sales and Marketing. A really interesting guest with me today here, Mr. Randy Anderson. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you know that we interview incredible people, business owners and thought leaders from disaster restoration, from plumbing, from HVAC. And what we want is the stories. We want to hear the high highs. We want to hear the low lows and all of the lessons that were learned along the way. And I think Randy's going to bring a lot of that today, because I don't think I've ever interviewed anybody who has the type of background that Randy has, and then where he has gone into and what he's been doing for the last 2 decades. So I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So Randy was a senior manufacturing engineer for Northrop Grumman Aerospace Systems. And to tell you what that kind of means, that's an INR project for the FA-18A Hornet, International Offset Program. And then he left Northrop for Intergraph CAD and CAM, left Intergraph for a startup. And so this stop a little familiar for a lot of you guys. Yeah. Left there, a tremendous opportunity, a huge career. He leaves for a startup with a web development software and consulting company. He has an extensive background in software development, owned a consulting company that focuses on supply chain, web development, wireless data collections, and IT. He is the founder and owner of Mazama Services, which is DBA, doing business as Roto-Rooter Plumbers of Northeast Alabama for the last 22 years. Also has Aeon Water Technology, water filtration solutions for home, commercial, and industrial, formerly known as the Alabama Connecticut Water. He's had that for 16 years. And now here very recently, in the last 5 years, his son Austin has come back to work, was running Aeon Water, and in 2024 was promoted to the president of the company. So, Randy, that's a lot.
That is a long list. Sorry.
That is a resume and a half, my friend. So thank you for taking the time to come on. And we're going to get into the plumbing stuff, and we're going to get into everything else you're doing. But first and foremost, you helped design and build really cool things that blew up things. And let's go there. Let's talk a little bit about your time working on the FA-18A Hornet.
Okay. Well, let me back up and tell you that I grew up in Oregon, and I grew up in the 70s. I'm old, so I grew up in the 70s, missed Vietnam. And so all of that, I was not into, the left coast is kind of hey, we don't like war. So, but the opportunity that when I was finishing college, I had an opportunity to go work for Northrop, and they were doing a lot of CAD CAM, computer aided design and management. And that was they were on the bleeding edge of that. So that's really why I went there. And I really didn't want to work on the F-18. And I got in and they said, no, you're going to work on the F-18. Because I was like, I'm not really a hawk. I really, they had another project that was the 747 for Boeing. And anyway, long story short, I became a hawk. I fell in love with the plane. We just saw the Blue Angels again here just a few months back as their last show. So I love the plane. Never have a chance to fly in it. But Northrop has the subcontract. They build the fuselage, put it on a rail car, ship it to St. Louis, and it used to be McDonnell Douglas. Now Boeing puts the wings on and the cockpit, and then they fly it off there. I guess they're about done with the after 40 years. You'd think they'd be about done with it, but anyway, so love the plane, and of course it's a new generation over what we were building back in the 80s.
Jeez, that's pretty cool.
Yep.
So the International Offset Program.
This was something that really got my interest up. So one, I was working as a manufacturing engineer, so we worked on how to build the plane and the tooling and the design and again the CAD. But Northrop and their claim to fame is back with the F-5 fighter. They were selling that internationally, and so if you take an airplane and you want to take it and you want well, in this case, we were working with Australia, was one of the first ones, and Australia wanted X number of planes. But if you understand international business, you can't have, if you're, and I think those days it was 35 million a copy, and that's a lot of money to come out of even Australia's budget, to come out of their balance of trade. We're all hearing about trade wars now. Mm-hmm. But so what Northrop came up with, and I'm sure others were doing it as well, is the idea is we would set up, and part of the aircraft, part of Australia's aircraft, they would build some portions of it. So hence they would get money back because they were building parts of the airplane, and hence the airplane didn't cost them as much money. The other thing that it did is it helped put people to work in Australia or in Canada or in Spain or wherever this was done. And so that's what I love doing. I ended up getting an MBA in international business, and then that led to a bunch of other things. But that was really where I wanted to go, was to get into this international sales and marketing as they were selling the planes to other parts of the world. So unfortunately for me, that didn't work out, and that was kind of one of the reasons I left Northrop.
So when you're working on projects like that, and that amount of security and that amount of technology and the dollars that are associated with that, from a security standpoint for yourself, what was that like? Were you constantly having to be real guarded about everything, or were you able to be open and around?
No, Northrop and the cycle in that aerospace world, that was not at that on that fighter. It was controlled, but not like a secret program. I did have the opportunity, was recruited to go into another project. This was back in the 80s. I didn't know it at the time. There was speculation, but it eventually became the B-2, the stealth bomber, because Northrop, of course, builds that. That's the baby. And of course, that all comes from the whole history with Jack Northrop, the guy that found it, and the flying wing and all of this. But I actually steered away from that, had been offered a job to go work on that, and didn't want to because I like to talk. So you had to sign us. It was all, very hush hush. And because, the plane was secret for a number of years before it finally came out. So yeah, that was one of those crossroads. Did I make the right choice? I think I did, but who knows? So
if you were spending a couple of years in Area 51, you're not just going to open up on that right now, huh?
Yeah, I did not have that opportunity. No, I was all in the public space. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. All right. So you start out as a fighter jet manufacturing engineer. You pivot to selling software, consulting, eventually into owning your own plumbing and drain cleaning business.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's that. When I said we don't get a lot of this type of interview, that would be why. Yeah. So let me know what drove those major career shifts in your mind to say, hey, I'm over here. I'm very successful. I put a lot of time and effort into this, but I want to go way over here and see what happens. And to do that multiple times, what drove the major career shifts?
Well, the big thing for me is, again, in the early 80s, the CAD CAM was all the rage, or at least it was growing. And this was before AutoCAD. This was before, a number of those came out. And so we were on I call it the bleeding edge of doing design work. So my background was mechanical. I ended up joining a newer company, although they had quite a dominance in mapping and architecture, and they were growing in the mechanical world. And that's this company called Intergraph. And so I was looking to leave the aerospace because like I said, the opportunity that I wanted to follow didn't open up. So anyway, I jumped to Intergraph and then worked there for about 13, 14 years, but they were a great company, ability to work up. I worked both in the mechanical application area and then later on in the electronics. So we were doing electronic design, circuit boards, hybrids, integrated circuits. And so that's pretty crazy for a gearhead to be playing in what I call the Sparky world.
Hmm.
But anyway, so we did all of that. But Intergraph was great in the sense of always loved the international side. So I had a chance with Intergraph to go over to Europe and work for a while and in sales and marketing. So we were selling to Swatch and British Aerospace, and I mean it was all over. We were all over Europe as well as into Asia and some of the others. And that's really where I wanted to go, was international marketing and sales. So
Was that just the international? Was that the challenge of it, or an interest in the other cultures?
I think a combination of all of it. I don't look back, I didn't travel as a kid. I wasn't raised overseas. My parents had never been out of the country until I ended up living kind of as a TDY in Holland for a while and brought my parents over. So I wasn't raised it was just something that was really interesting to me. And when I did my as in a master's candidate, you have to do a thesis, and I looked at comparative electronics manufacturing between the U.S. and 5 Asian countries, and we toured 5 Asian countries at different manufacturing for electronic components. So it was really, it was an interesting time. So, yeah, what does all this have to do with plumbing? That's a really good question. Nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Well, let's go back to that here for a second. So you've mentioned some of the countries that you went to, and I'm sure you went to many more or had experiences with people from those countries. Having that time spent in international business, what kind of influence did that have even on the plumbing business that you have today of, hey, I learned this when I spent time over in China, or I learned this when I spent time over in the Netherlands?
I don't. I would say probably not as much. The best experience that I've and we haven't talked about it yet, but when I was working for Northrop, and working on my master's degree at night, I ended up coaching rowing at a collegiate there's a college out there called Loyola Marymount,
Mhm.
a good Catholic school, and I had rowed in college, and so I ended up, you can see, but in pictures behind me here, there's an oar and a couple other pictures, but that was probably, coaching was not something I really wasn't what I had set out that, hey, I want to be a coach when I grow up. But I had this opportunity to coach at a collegiate level, and it was a lot of fun. And I learned so much about building teams, and I'd coached little league and things like that. But at a
Yeah.
collegiate level, it's a whole different animal. You're finally getting, you know, men and women that are getting serious about sports, and
Mhm.
not parents being serious about sports, but the rowers actually. So that was probably one of the best experiences I had about that I can apply to what I'm doing here. Because what are we trying to do in any business? You're trying to build a team. You're trying to get everybody to make that boat go, and everybody pull on the oar with the saying. What's the movie now? Boys on the Boat.
Okay.
Uh, that's really what they were trying to do, and trying to get, in this case, 8 or 9 folks to do the same thing and make that thing go down the road, go down the water.
So when you got into selling and in international, of course, the time spent with the CAD and building, designing, jet fighters, what are some of the lessons then that you were able to pull from that experience that you can use today?
So it's really trying to set a vision and identifying, what our goal is. A lot of times I find people don't have a good goal, don't aren't clear with what their goal is, and even if you get so tied up in what you do day in and day out, you're working, as they say, working in your business. You don't hang that target of where you want to go, and that was what we had to do, not only in business, but again, going back to this rowing analogy. What is our target? We want to get to either this time, or we want to win this race, or we want to, move up in this ranking. And so that was always something that I've found that is a leverage going forward in each one of the businesses. The other thing that's really interesting is trying to get the right mix of people. And you got to find that not everybody either wants to be part of the team, or they want to have their own team, and so it's really trying to decipher and learn from, who are the players and how do we get them in the right positions. Using the rowing analogy, there is a structure of the big guys, the guys that are the, 6+ foot tall and, muscular, and the rest. They're the ones in the middle of the boat. We call it the engine room. And the little guys like me, like when I rode, I would be in the bow because I was a lot lighter then, but anyway, we were the guys that kind of set the tone of the boat. And then the guys at the back of the boat were the smart ones. They were the ones that kept the pace and the right going. But all of that kind of feeds back into what we do when we're even for plumbing and we're building teams now and making sure that we got a goal that they want to try to get to.
But that's a pretty interesting analogy when you talk about where somebody's going to go on the boat as you're coaching them. And in the rowing world, you can look at somebody in the way that they're built and their size and their muscle and say, okay, you belong in the middle of the boat, at the front or the back. In the business world, that's pretty illegal. I don't think we're allowed to do that.
Yes,
but we do have to, quote unquote, size people up. So from a business standpoint, when you get somebody who comes on board and you spend some time with them, beyond just the role and responsibility you hired them for, but we're talking about building a team and what that looks like. What are strategies that maybe you learned from coaching that now allow you to decide where somebody should be on the figurative boat with the plumbing company?
Well, I think probably there's a number of different paths, but the first thing I look for, with somebody that's coming in, even now we hire people who have experience and we hire people who have no experience, and depending upon the roles and the licensing and things like that and what they're going to do. But I look, like most people, you look for somebody that's willing to learn, that's open-minded. So we have kind of when you're coming in, that's part of our evaluation is, are they open? Are they open-minded, closed-minded? Are they teachable? I think is the current phrase. And so we're looking at that. We also like to see if they're problem solvers. So the kind of plumbing that we do, all of our plumbing is what I call service plumbing. We are not in new construction. We'll remodel and do things like that. But most of my people have to be able to go out and troubleshoot something. They have to look at it and figure out that this pipe is broken and I've got to somehow, even though I don't have any room to work, I've got to figure out how to do that. So we look for people who have that ability to troubleshoot. If they aren't what was the old back? I think they called it type X and type Y people or whatever. But the idea is we want that person that can think on their feet and decide what they want to do. That's what we're looking for.
A lot of it is finding people that you can empower to make the decision on the job site so that it's not rolling uphill to your desk.
Exactly. Well, but we also want them to be able to troubleshoot because, again, they have to be able to figure out how to work themselves inside of a box and not have to dig the hole, replace all the plumbing in the house. And so we have to look at that and try to make those repairs.
Okay. So as you made the transition from aerospace engineering into sales,
yep,
and that became the passion of where you wanted to go, and now you walked away from a job that a lot of people would dream about, and you said, no, I want to go sell stuff probably in other countries. Was there ever a moment when that happened and you went, what on earth have I gotten myself into?
Well, yeah. Software is it's a whole nother industry. And, of course, there's all kinds of things that go on. But so for an example, one of the things that was very frustrating is, I'm not a coder. I can't sit down and write C++ code. I understand how it works. I understand, the structure, I understand what the process is, but I'm a mechanical engineer. I don't know anything about writing, in the case, that kind of code. But that said, my job was to try to figure out what the end user, what problems they were trying to solve and how we could get software to solve that problem. So I had to take what the problem was and put it into words that the software developer could build. Mm-hmm. The frustration part is that software, like everything else, goes through an evolution. And so we were dealing with, and at the particular time, we were dealing with an older version of software that had a 10 or 15 year life, and then you have to almost take and wipe that out and start all over. And so we lived through that. And I think I had hair, and then after that whole thing, I lost my hair at that cycle. But yes, so software is a different animal altogether. The web has been, like I said, I left this more of what I would call a mini or a mainframe software orientation to doing more web-based software. And that was a whole nother shift, another dynamic, because software there is, the web in the 90s was new, brand new, evolving. There wasn't much intelligence to it. And so one of the companies I worked for, we had a software product, and there's the competitive nature. I ended up moving back to Seattle, so we were right in the middle with Microsoft and Amazon and some of the others. But for example, the software package that I was marketing and selling was one that Microsoft kind of looked at it and said, "Hey, we want that," but they didn't want to buy ours. They reinvented the wheel and created one and basically put us out of business. So it's that kind of change, and it's really a challenging time in that space.
It almost sounds like your responsibility in doing that was very similar to what you're looking for in employees right now, to go out, find a problem, diagnose it, come up with a solution of it, have the intelligence to do that, but also the proactive nature
Correct.
to handle the situation and find a way to communicate it that makes sense to everybody. So
Yep.
in
Exactly.
some way, it sounds like you're trying to build a business out of a bunch of little mini Randys.
Yeah.
That's got to be scary at some
Yeah.
point.
Real scary.
You might be looking in the mirror next time going, huh,
Yeah.
how about that?
Yeah. How about that?
All right. So we work with a lot of people who are in different franchises, Roto-Rooter and many others. And a lot of the people who, not across the board, but a lot of the people who seem to start a franchise or buy a franchise come from the corporate world somewhere along the way. They were successful. They got burned out of corporate life. They wanted to own their own business. They're used to having some systems in place. So a franchise sort of makes sense. And let's hit the ground running with this thing. But as many people who actually take the leap and leave the healthcare and the 401k and the security of the corporate job, start your own, there's 100 that don't.
Right.
You're one of the ones that did. What's the tipping point that made you decide to buy a Roto-Rooter franchise?
Well, our real issue. So I was in this high tech world. I had sold my last company to a larger company, and the idea is that they were gonna put us together. They put 4 companies together. They were going to go public, and of course, then that was right at the turn of the century, and of course the software and all that kind of crashed. So they never did take the whole thing public. I had a 1-year handcuff and then left. But at that point, I was traveling the world. So I'd get on a plane on Monday and I'd be in Korea. I made in Seoul, Korea. And then next week I was flying to Birmingham, England. The next week I was going to Israel. And I had a young family. It wasn't what we wanted. And I believe very strongly in the Lord's leading, praying and having the Lord lead you on what you're going to do. And so that's what my wife and I were doing at that time. Is we had just gotten out of the one company, and we were living in Colorado at the time, and very much impressed. The Lord impressed both of us. It wasn't just me. That we had 2 commandments to follow. One was to relocate our family either to Oregon, which is where my family's from, and come back to Alabama, which we had been here with Intergraph, and give our kids family. Because we felt that was a very strong piece. The other one was for me to make a career change that got me out of this high-tech international travel, even though I loved it, but felt that I had to make that commitment so that I could be a dad, and a husband.
Sure.
Otherwise, we wouldn't survive. So all that to say is that about I think it was in 2001, we came back to Huntsville, and again, very prayerfully, some friends of ours some acquaintances, not close friends at the time, but they came to us and they said, "Hey, you need to own a Roto-Rooter."
Really?
Say what?
Wow. Okay.
So that was the opportunity, and again, a lot of prayer, because it was like, let's see, do I really want to do this? And it wasn't a big one. It was there was about 4 people working in the company, and so it was a pretty small little firm. So long story short, we ended up buying that first franchise. And my MO is I have to work in it. Number one, it was small and you had to work in it. I couldn't just sit there and count the money. But the reason for me, why did I choose that? Number one, it did have cash flow. So in looking at a business, I have done startups from nothing. 6 months with no revenue coming in. It had cash flow, which was great. It had reputation, not the best in the world, but at least there was a reputation, and hence people were calling. So that was something, and it kept me in the same county, day in and day out.
Yeah,
So,
that's big. That's big with the family.
that's why we jumped into it. Roto-Rooters are they're not a typical franchise. They don't come with all the business training and software and the rest. It's
Mhm.
if you were going to do another one, and I don't know which, I haven't done any others in this case, but just in talking with people in the industry. And it's good and it's bad.
So I believe Roto-Rooter is the largest plumbing franchise right now, correct?
Yes, they would want me to say that. Yes, I'm sure they are.
All right, we got that plug in there. So Roto-Rooter is the largest plumbing franchise.
Yeah.
When you bought this thing, roughly 22 years ago, where was it then? Was Roto-Rooter a major brand at that time?
Yeah, I mean, and another thing for me is that I had, Roto-Rooter's been around. This year is 90 years, so I grew up knowing the Roto-Rooter jingle, and who they were, and we know that, and so that brand awareness was big for me. That was a huge reason why I went that way.
Okay. So when you become part of a major brand like Roto-Rooter, and I come from Ace Hardware, so I can speak from some experience with this as well. When you have this major brand, this major franchise, how do you balance corporate guidelines and responsibilities that you're getting from the home office and what they want you to do and say and be versus your local market, your local business needs?
I didn't think that it was that much different. In fact, I probably the bigger issue for me was and it's a bad way to be, I guess, but I always felt like, Roto-Rooter was me. So, if I always felt if I had another, like, for example, there was another franchise next door to us, or, another county, and if they weren't doing something right, then that was a reflection on me, because now all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're carrying the same name I'm carrying. So, I was in a mode that sometimes you'd almost want to go over to the next franchise and do the job right, because they were giving us a bad name.
Yeah.
So I've never had any problem with the brand and the trying to reflect what we try. In fact, I try to take it to the next level, as far as trying to give people the service that they want. And you can't make everybody happy, but I sure tried for a while.
Do you find that most of your customers know that you're locally owned or they view it as a big corporate?
We try hard to get that message out, even though you have that corporate name.
Mm.
So that would be good. I'd say it varies. We get a lot of business. I'm sure you in the hardware business, people buy from people, and so our biggest county right now, we have 19 counties that we service in Alabama, 19 different franchises, if you will, where we started out with just two, and but our biggest one is the one that I live in, because people know me after all these years. Even though I wasn't born here and I wasn't raised here, and my last name isn't on the roads going through, but we're in Alabama. We're not in any of the big cities. Huntsville's the biggest city close to us, and then Birmingham is south of us, and we're not in those markets. So we're in small town America.
One of the frustrations I had with Ace Hardware was the amount of people that would walk in the door with a coupon from True Value
Oh yes.
and then get really mad when I said, I'm sorry, we can't take that. And then I'd end up having to take the what coupon
Yes.
because I got a customer screaming at me in the middle of a showroom floor.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
we have that too. Birmingham has a different, because of Birmingham market and there's more money. Huntsville, same thing, versus the county. We get those coupon issues as well. And
Mhm.
do you fight it? Do you, how do you play it? So anyway, it's a tough. You're right. It's a tough nut.
Yeah. Sometimes you lose the battle to win the war.
Exactly.
So plumbing and drain cleaning isn't the first thing people associate, obviously, with a former engineer, a sales leader. You talked about what you got from Roto-Rooter, but where do you see the industry going? Where do you see Roto-Rooter going that makes you want to continue to invest in what you're doing?
Well, in the trades, we see a lot of private equity moving in. It's kind of like venture, like a whole other generation of venture capital. I did a lot with venture capital in the software world, but again, we're in that evolution. And so I probably get pinged every other day from somebody with private equity that wants to, buy us or whatever because of the franchise. But I love the brand. I think it's a hard brand to beat because of the 90 years in existence. We have kind of diversified a little bit to add some other capabilities. Again, looking at what our customers' problems are, and then how can we provide something that meets them. So, as you know, Roto-Rooter got into water cleanup, really water cleanup, not restoration, water cleanup. We started in 18 with water cleanup, and I think Roto-Rooter got into it in 15, if I
Yeah,
remember.
I was going to say it was about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And and that is a great connection because we get called when they have a flood. We get called when the sewer backs up. We get called, so it's a great synergy for us to provide that service. And then the other thing we started, as you mentioned, Aon Water. We've had water filtration equipment, my wife and I, in our homes for years before this, but that was another kind of a friend of ours from church said, "Hey, you need to look at this water filtration company." And so we did. So we signed up as a dealer for a company called Connecticut out of Newberry, Ohio, and love it. And great equipment, and so that's been a function of something else that we can offer to our customers.
I know a lot of people, when they think about the plumbing industry, they think about the water restoration industry, they think about, well, you don't have to worry about the dollar. You don't have to worry about oil. You don't have to worry about the economy quite as much. That they call it recession proof or recession resistant. Was that something that initially drew you into plumbing? And do you still think that's the case?
I would say that was a consideration. So I came again, and I'm old, but in 2000, 2001, 2002, software, we were selling a system. The company that my little company got bought by, we were selling a system that started at $1 million, software system, and so all of our customers were Fortune 500. But when that software downturn in the software world happened in, I think, 2001, our sales went to nothing. And so I was already out the door, so to speak. But yeah, the recession proof is another great thing about what we do with the trades. Now, we went through the 2007, 2008 recession, and we fell, I think, about 30%. So that was a hit, but it certainly wasn't the zero that I had been used to in the software world.
Puts it in perspective.
Very much.
So 22 years, you've seen a lot of pipes, a lot of poop water,
Yep.
a lot of chaos.
Yep.
Tell me the craziest, most memorable plumbing job you've ever had.
Probably the craziest thing that personally, because I like I said, when I first got started, I was in the van, and because I'm a hands-on kind of, I want to be the expert. But probably the craziest one was we were roto-rootering a sewer line at a home, and I pulled the cable back, and I pulled a possum out.
Oh.
Now he was dead, but why have I got a possum? So somehow he had gotten in their sewer system, and away we went.
Line item on your invoice for possum removal?
Exactly, yeah.
And disposal?
There you go.
Nice.
Yep.
So being part of a group like you are, and I know you're also involved in other industry activities and other Roto-Rooter activities that are out there, how do you go about collaborating and networking with other industry business owners?
In my first, let's say my first 10 years, I didn't do that. I look back, I put my head down and I said, "Hey, we got to do this." And you're too busy working on your business. And I didn't do it. And then finally, I ended up talking to another guy that owns a family that owns Roto-Rooter over in Greenville. And they said, you need to get involved. And so we did. And so we have really enjoyed. In the last 10 years, we've been involved with Roto-Rooter has a franchise association. We also are, working with you folks at Bowland, again, tied through Roto-Rooter. We're into some other networking groups that we involve in the people in the trades. So it's been and it's really been a great addition. It gives you the ability to look at the business from other people's perspective and add those. I've got a good friend. He also attends Bowland, but his whole world evolves around his first job, which was a parking attendant. So maybe you'll get him on this commentary as well. But
Yeah.
yeah. So it's again how to look at those things. The other thing we're doing is in Alabama we have different licensing. I'm sure than most states. We have plumbing license and we have what we call on-site wastewater. And so I've in the last 10 years I've been somehow I got recruited into that. So I've been involved in the licensing board and in the association supports that. So that kind of feeds into, what are you doing? What are you doing now that your son's running the business? But I've been teaching. So even earlier this week, I teach people on how to pump septic tanks and how to install, advanced wastewater treatment systems. And so it's been a great way to give back to our industry and to learn from others.
Kind of like the coaches will always want to coach
Yeah, exactly.
philosophy. Yeah. I'm with you 100% as far as the going out to the shows and meeting people. And I know when I was with Ace, my father and I, we would go, they do 2 conventions a year.
Right.
And we would always go to them. And the first couple of years I was there, we'd go making major purchases at it. And then the vendors all started extending all of the promotions, and you didn't even have to go to make it. And you could make it a month later, get the same price. And I would ask them, like, why are we wasting this time? Why are we wasting this money to go out to this show? And he looked me dead set in the eye. My dad's not a very social person. He'll prefer to be in his lazy boy and have a old fashioned and be watching a ball game. And he goes, I need it. He goes, this is too hard. I need to hear from other people who are going through the exact same problems that I am, because it just reaffirms that we're going to get through this.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes people get very bogged down in the day to day and the grind, and I'm going to outwork you and I'm going to outsweat you. And you're working harder.
Yeah. Well, and as we're tied in with violin, but we have a peer group through Roto-Rooter, and it's not all the franchises, but it's a handful of franchises. And the great thing about that is that I'm not competing with any of those people, and we all have the same problems. Different state, different maybe different outlook, but different size. But we're all facing the same problems, and so some people are. They're going with their hair on fire and you want to watch what they're doing and maybe pull that back. We do the same thing on the Aon side. Connecticut has dealer meetings and there's certain players in there that I love to find out what they're doing, because it's, can we steal from them?
Yeah. But that's what they're designed for. Just see those other perspectives.
That's right.
Like, I never would have thought it that way. Maybe I don't agree 100% with it, but it sort of changes my perception of what this issue is and how I can tackle it from a different direction.
That's very true. Very true.
Do you have examples maybe of any specific influences that you got from a peer group or from an industry event where it was eye-opening and you were able to bring it back to the business and make an adjustment?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of them, but probably the one that kind of started this whole thing was the ability. We've been looking at software, and of course, I'm a software guy. When I first got in this thing 20 years ago, the software was nothing. I mean, it was terrible. The software package we were running was running on, it was like running on a single PC. And of course, it's in 20 years, it's gone crazy. So that was really what we were trying to about 8 or 9 years ago. We were looking at service type. Do we want to go to service type? And make that jump. And so I went and visited some other Roto-Rooters, and one had implemented Service Titan. It just started. Another one had gone a different direction. So that was probably a big turning point for us. We, of course, have been on Service Titan for 8 years. I think it's been now. Still can't figure all the features out, but we're working hard to do that.
So as you're going through all these different changes in the business, but you're also going through just different industries and different careers. And you mentioned relying on the Lord and prayer and the church and how that's had an influence on you. Do you have any other part of that process as you're thinking through diversification, either of what you want to be in life or what you want your company to offer? Is there a process for figuring that out?
A lot of that's tied to me. So I'll tell you kind of a funny story, but about 6 years ago, both of the kids had left the house, had gone on to college or whatever they were going to do. And so we had felt that I had felt strongly that this was our commandment, to do this. And now, because through that whole process, even though I was growing the business, I always felt like, okay, once the kids are gone, then I'll go back into international. I'll go back and do this other business. And a lot of prayer over that. And because I was like, okay, great. I'm tired of dealing with we get calls 24/7 and, you're never off call in service business. So I got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm ready to sell. I'm ready to get out of it. And again, a good friend of mine that owns Roto-Rooters, he came down and he sat me down and he looked at what he got. He said, I got a great business. He said, I can't pay you what it's worth or whatever, but I'll help you. So he gave me some coaching, said, look, you need to get a manager in here and have a manager run it so you can get away and work on the business and not in the business and not have to answer the calls 24/7. So we did that and we tried to sell it and couldn't at that particular time, weren't able to sell. And it's again through prayer. It's like felt like, okay, great. Why are you not letting me get out of this? And so play it forward. About 5 years ago, my son, who had done things like working in the business when he was young, and my daughter as well, but he wanted to go do his own thing. Well, then all of a sudden he made a right hand turn and said, okay, we'd like to come in and run the water filtration business. And I'm like, okay, great. You want to buy it from me? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, all right. Now he sees Roto-Rooter and he wants to do that. So now I know that there was I believe a higher power in kind of, hey, don't do this. Don't open this door for me to walk away from this because this is the reason why. So I'll take that as a blessing and move on.
Yeah, no, I 100% love that. That's a tremendous answer, and not an easy answer.
No, it was
a lot easier to put it all on yourself, I think.
That's right.
So you were selling $1 million software systems.
Yep.
And now you're selling in-home plumbing. You could have a ticket price at $200.
Yep.
That's a pretty wide range. So if you can do well at both of those, you can sell. So what's a piece of advice that you'd give to sales professionals who are trying to sort of stand out in a crowded market?
Well, I'm not a typical sales. So water filtration is a different market than service plumbing. Service plumbing we get, and same like probably like water cleanup. They call you when they got a problem, and that's an easy sell. You show up and I'm here to be your savior, and I'm here to fix it, or I'm here to subtract the water, or I'm here to. But water filtration is not. It is more of what I call more of a. You've got to drag that customer into understanding and educate them and the rest. So probably the biggest thing I think is selling in the service world is relatively easy as long as you are good at putting the right solution to the customer. The biggest problem that I will tell you that most of us have is we only craft one solution that is the one that I would choose. Right? You've heard this before.
I love that answer.
Yep. And that's if I could get my guys to get out of the way, and I'm guilty of it too. I do the same thing. I expect something different than what, my guys will try to sell. And so we're trying to teach them, give them options. Don't just look at what you do, because what you do is not necessarily what they do. So
what I have found through 25 years of working in sales, but also managing countless and coaching and training countless salespeople over the years, is a lot of times once you start getting pretty good at it, you get a set system in how you sell, which means A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D.
Right.
And that's the direction we're going to go. And the quicker I can get to D, the quicker I can get through this sale, I can move on with my day, get my commission check. And you have to almost slow some good salespeople down.
Yeah.
Say, guess what, dummy? B ain't always next.
That's right.
We might have to go all the way over here. And do you have strategies for coaching salespeople into thinking outside the box and not just being by the script when they get really good at being by the script?
Well, so again, I have different hats. So hat one is Roto-Rooter. In that case, you're trying to give people options. Hat two is water filtration. So I have salespeople in that area. And that is, again, they've reached out to you because they've got a problem. So a lot of that is an education process in some cases. Understanding, are they an emotional buyer? Are they a technical buyer? what's their motivation to do that, and then still giving them options. But you know, I tend to want to teach you everything I know before I would ask you to close. One of the things that I don't like in the water filtration business is we have competitors that are what I call high pressure, and that was kind of a new one for me in the sense of what I call B2C, business to consumer.
Mhm.
Uh, so I fight very hard. I've had some salespeople come in and they want to put the screws to the customer, and that's not how I want to do business. But anyway, all that to say is, so we try to teach them different paths based on what are they selling. Water restoration or water filter, water cleanup is again a little bit more like a Roto-Rooter sale in the sense, although there isn't as many options. It's either it's wet or it's dry.
Yeah.
How do I get there?
And that sales cycle, I think, is a lot of building trust.
It is. It's building trust, and and there is some education because we all have to deal with insurance companies, and that is that's a different. That was very different for me. I had never dealt with insurance companies prior to getting into that business, and it's an eye opener.
Yeah. It's its own little animal and a whole nother rabbit hole.
It is.
So you've been at gigantic companies, defense contractors. You were competing against Microsoft. You've now got your own business. You had a consulting business. You've been in all these different industries along the way. You've seen a lot of business leaders. Where do you see common mistakes that business leaders are making as they try to scale their business?
So, and again, remember, if you got to determine what you're trying to do with your business. So, assuming, and it was true in software. We had software competitors that were trying to build up their numbers because they wanted to sell, and they wanted to. And so, in our case, I want to build up my numbers as a plumber so that I can sell out to private equity, and hence get a bigger a bigger valuation. Even though you might be pissing everybody off on the way getting there, but your numbers are big.
Mm-hmm.
So coming back, I guess, to your question, assuming that you're going to continue and you don't have that goal of what I call scorched earth, um, a lot of us try to take on too many things. In fact, I have to in the consulting world, and I've talked to Chuck and John and some of the others about it, but in the consulting world, when we had a consulting organization, we would every year look at all the different things we were doing and what could I stop doing that either wasn't profitable, and then could I do something that was more profitable? So in the plumbing world, we do. I love, of course, I drive my guys crazy because I'm the engineer. So I love advanced septic systems. They got pumps and they got drip and they got, blowers and they got, and it's got a control panel and electricity. And most plumbers hate electricity. We do a lot of lift stations. We do a lot of, of course, tankless. When they first come out, we were on, I wanted to be right there because I wanted to be at what I call the high tech side of plumbing. So I caused some of my own problems in that, but I believe that you have to in our case, go for the leading edge and drop some of the basic stuff that's not as profitable. I found in some cases and I'm guilty of it, I want to do things because I want to maintain control of that customer. So for an example, right now, leak detection. I've bought leak detection equipment probably 5 different times in the last 20 years. And I say, okay, we're going to do it. And then we're not very good at it. I just stop and go, okay, sell it and let's go do, let pass that off to somebody else. So those are the things that I've seen. And I see when competitors, they try to tackle so many things. And it's very interesting. I don't have a good handle on it yet, but it's really interesting to watch these in the trades, these multi-trade companies, ones that are doing electrical and plumbing and HVAC, and it's interesting. It's of course I'm not that far away. I'm doing water cleanup and water filtration and plumbing, and so I guess I got the same shoe.
You got that entrepreneur itch.
Yep.
To go find another challenge and try and tackle it. With your engineering background, your engineering mindset, when I think of an engineer, I think of a kid that gets a toy bike for Christmas and immediately tears it apart and then tries to build it back together to figure out how it works. and can I fix this piece or make this piece a little bit better? Does having an engineering mind change the way that you make decisions in a business? Do you think that that slows you down at all? Does it confuse other people because your process might be different?
Well, again, I want to know. I want to be the expert on on anything. I have a hard time if we get a boiler, for an example, and we'll get a call. Okay, we got a boiler, and I'll take the job even though I'm not an expert at it because I want to go. I look at it as a challenge, and I drive my people nuts for doing that. It it may not be profitable because I'll spend half the time trying to figure out what the technology is and how it works. So that's one of my weaknesses. And instead of just saying, no, we don't do that.
I can envision you right now just sitting there with an employee, and an employee's telling you how they want to do something. You don't agree with it, and you just look at them and go, when we were building the FA-18 Hornet, this is how we did it,
Right.
and just shutting the conversation down at that point.
Well, most of them, in fact, that was one of the reasons early on, they don't understand what I say. And so that's one of the frustrations I've had over the years and you try to put it in simple terms. And sometimes I think I make it too simple.
Well, with leadership, you mentioned your faith, and you've mentioned kind of how you think through some different processes in order to build the business. But what are some of those driving core principles that you have, or values that you feel that you've got, or great leaders have, that exemplify, that allow them not only to lift themselves up, but build that team that we're talking about?
There's a couple of different things. Number one, as we've already talked about, is trying to get the right person and get them in the right job. One of the things that I learned early on in corporate America, if I was running a business unit, and so I'd get a call from the vice president, and he'd say, "Hey, I got this guy, and he's a really good guy, but we want to ship him to you."
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to fire him. So big corporate America does not like to get rid of people, until there's a major thing, and then all of a sudden okay, well, we're going to have a major layoff, and then everybody gets laid off. But if you just have a person that either isn't the right fit or whatever, in a small company, in a startup company, you can't do that. You can't afford that, and so you have to. You have to. Unfortunately, Bob, you're not the right guy for the job. We just need to part ways and move on, and be willing to do that. So that's. Am I the best at that? No, I've been accused of being a marshmallow at times because I have loyalty to people, and but that is a weakness and something I continue to work on it that makes good. The other piece is, again, as I said before, putting a vision. Where do we want to be? What do we want to be when we grow up, and trying to get there. The other is empowering people. And I try to get them to, this is yours, what do you want to do? And my wife says I don't ask them to ask enough questions. So I'm still trying to learn to come in and not solve the problem for them, but, okay, what are we going to do here?
Let's go back to the vision for a second, because that's interesting. It's your company, you're building the company, you're also trying to build a team. Now you have your son who's involved in it. Now it's become more of a legacy. As you continue to refine the vision of what your business is going to become, how much of that is your vision and what you thought of 22 years ago versus 10 years ago versus today? And how much of that is bringing in the team and saying, okay, guess what? We're in this together now. This is a we organization, and getting their input into what this vision could potentially become?
I have tried that over the years because, as you probably know, in consulting, we would consult, and as a consultant, you come in and, hey, I've got this great solution, and we're going to shove it down your throats, and of course, then the team throws it all up.
People love that.
Oh, they love it. I've got some stories about that one but anyway, so we try to do that here. We try to say, okay, this is what we're trying to do. This is where we're trying to go. We try to solicit input. I find that you'll have a few people that are very much in tune with what that vision is, and trying to make it and thinking in that direction. And a lot of them are just, they're worried about making payroll, or paying their bills at the end of the month. And so, so not everybody thinks in that thing. They just want to know and trust that you're going in the right direction and you're looking out for them. And so we do a little bit of we'll probably do a lot more of the, hey, we're looking out for you. We want to take care of you. We want to make sure you're happy, and and that your family's fed and all of those. And then we want to help you get to that next level of whatever you want to try to do. Either it's do you want more training? Do you want to make more money? Do you want to do a different job function? What do you want to try to do within the ability of what we've got? So.
Do you ever fall back on the vision or the mission of this when you're making these challenging decisions, or you're about to have you talked about sometimes being a marshmallow when it comes to having a difficult conversation with employees, and I understand that.
Yep.
Do you fall back on the mission and vision at times when you use that, or do you point to employees and say, well, what does the mission say? What does the vision say? And use that as a guiding point?
I was trained, 100 years ago to follow this mission, vision, and the rest. And even today, we talk in our peer group about that and try to continue. In a service business, we're here to serve, and so we have. To me, that at the end of the day, that's what it is, and provide a good benefits. That is our mission. We're here to serve. We serve our customer, and we want to make sure that you're taken care of as somebody who's part of the team. What I really try to do is, again, look for ways to find what motivates them. So for example, in Alabama, you can't just, because I hold the master, anybody who works for me is not automatically a plumber. You have to put in 2 years and take a test. And so we try to work with our people to, okay, do you want to be a plumber? Yes, I want to be a plumber. Okay, great. Then we're going to send you to training. We're going to lay out a roadmap for you to get there. And sometimes that bites us. I just had 3 guys left and started their own company to compete with me. So it bites you, but it happens in all of our business.
That does, unfortunately. They'll learn.
Yep.
So you've spent all these years, you've built this business. It's a successful business. We're happy. We're serving the community. You're moving forward towards your mission, your vision. You're comfortable in your faith. And now your son's coming back in. So somebody, you've got that engineering mindset of, let me just fix the problem. And now you got to step back and let somebody else not only fix the problem, but as importantly, not fix the problem and learn from it. Right. So honestly, how hard is it to let go and let that next generation take over?
I thought it would be really tough, but it's really easy. I do have moments when I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You got that 20 years of 20 years of, you shouldn't do this. But
Randy, I have moments where I look in the mirror at home and go, what are you doing? You shouldn't do that. So I get it.
So my attitude, and that's what I told him. I said, effectively now I work for you. And so you have to tell me what you want to do, and I'll do that. So if you want me to stay home, I'll stay home. If you want me to come in and do training, I'll do training. You have to tell me what you want me to do. And so, and that's worked out, I think, pretty well. Probably the hardest part is that they want to play one against the other. And so I always have
the employees
my hands and say, go to the end. So, but other than that, there's a good book, and I remember the gentleman that I read a couple of years ago. It's called Strength to Strength, I think is the title of it. And it's I don't remember if Chuck recommended it or where I heard about it, but it talks about basically as we get older, and of course, I believe very much in and I don't know who coined it. In your 20s you want to learn, in your 30s you want to build, in your 40s you want to own, in your 50s you want to train, and then whatever. So I'm in that mode of now is my time to consult and train, and that's really what I want to do. But I will say that the part of the other role is I believe very much in grow or die, and I think I've imparted that to my son. So we're looking at other things. So that's part of my job as well, is to go out and look at other acquisitions, and that's my other role, the other hat I wear now.
So the inability in your youth to not potentially go chase the shiny new object didn't go away over time?
Nope.
Born in the blood, I think they call that.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay. All right. So with your son moving into this position, you moving into this other position that's new for both of you,
Yes.
complete dynamic change in both family and business. When you sat down, you started talking through what those roles are going to be and responsibilities and actions. Was it set on day one? This is how we're going to do it, and we're going to stick to the plan, or was there a lot of give and take, and we weren't able to keep consistency?
Um, I decided to hire a consulting firm. In fact, your consulting firm
Good
to
call. I like that decision.
to come in and to um, not only be a consultant but to be a mediator. And it's been I will tell you that she has done a wonderful job. I've told Chuck and Tim this both, but she's done a wonderful job for us, and she'll ask us questions, and like as a consultant's supposed to do. So that I think has been a very, very beneficial. So I would tell you that if anybody's considering that or going through that process, definitely go through that. And of course she had that same issue. One of the I think reason that you guys put her with us is that she went through that with her father, and taking over his business, and so she wasn't the first her first rodeo, as they say.
Just like a peer group, a little outsider view goes a long way.
It does. It really does. It's been well worth the money.
So now he's been in this role. Well, he's been the president now for a couple of months, we would say.
Yep.
But he's been a major piece in the business now for 5 years.
Yes.
We don't know if he's going to watch this thing or not. Let's assume he's not.
Probably.
So give me the time where he did something, and you looked at it and you wanted to fix the problem, and he's going in 100% different direction. You just shake your head and say, "Not a chance. Is that going to work?"
Well, a lot has to do with hiring, and so we approach hiring different. We're having that just before we got on. We had this whole discussion about who he's hiring, who wants to hire. So he's been running the water filtration side of the business for the last 5 years, and so he makes hires. His approach is to look for good people. Doesn't matter if they don't have to know anything about it. He just wants some good people, and then he figures he can train them. I'm like, you got to have a mix. Unfortunately, you got to have people that know what we know, either water filtration or know plumbing or know water cleanup. To be at least one of those or two of those to get the job done. Otherwise, you just got a bunch of people that you've got to be in the middle and you've got to run it. So that's really where we're having our biggest issues is who he hires. Mm-hmm. Trying to stay back and let him learn, and
he's got to build his own team.
He's got to build his own team. And we're going through that transition. We've had a lot of exodus, not really because he came into it, but because the manager that I had, we parted ways last year. And so we had a number of people that left that went either because he left or we're kind of waiting and saw that was coming. So we're kind of rebuilding our teams.
That's I think in a lot of ways that refresh and update the company and update the ways things are doing. That's it's like going to a conference and getting fresh new ideas. Only this is a little bit more permanent, a little bit more exciting, and more costly. Yep. But it's needed sometimes to come in and let's get some fresh blood and let's get some different viewpoints.
It is,
and how we're going to do this. So, you've got your son, you got your daughter-in-law, and I think as parents, obviously we all want our kids to be healthy. We want our kids to be happy. But deep down inside, I think most parents want their kids to be better than them, sure, and whatever that means to them. So where are you seeing things that your son, your daughter-in-law are doing better than you ever did?
Software. It's really strange. Really? When we were talking about this, I always wanted to bring more software into this industry and improve our communication with our customers. And I fought for that. Over the last probably 8 or 9 years, as I get older, I'm not as in tune. I'm not spending a lot of time in it. I mean, I'm about 20 plus years out of the quote unquote software world, and so he's come in and he's totally immersed in it. And so again, Service Titan is a product that it's a Ferrari, and you got to learn how to drive that Ferrari. And if you don't, then if you're driving it and it's just a Ford, then you're not getting your money out of it. And so that's why I say I think he's done a wonderful job with Service Titan, and he's not going well. He's chasing the ring on the merry-go-round, so to speak. He's not going what I call flaming arrows. He's not totally on the bleeding edge of what we're trying to do. So bringing pieces in and trying to execute that and moving forward. I would say that's probably one of the. I'm glad to see it because we've needed it. I haven't put that much time into it as I would like to.
Have you, with your background, or him with his embrace of technology, have you guys gone down the AI?
We're
Oh, yep.
starting. We're looking at it. Of course, Service Titan is bringing a lot of those pieces in, and right now we're trying to. What he and I are really focusing on is making sure that we're rebuilding the team and getting the right processes, and we're implementing a change in the way we price things, and trying to give the guys the tools within Service Titan so that they can offer more solutions instead of just the one, okay, well, I was here for 2 hours. I'm going to charge you 2 hours of labor. We want them to, here's option A, option B, option C. And we had tried that and it didn't work very well. And we're trying to get back into that mode of doing it. So that's really where we're spending most of our time. And not as much into AI, although the call center is something that I would really, we toy with that.
So with your son, daughter-in-law now in the business, and you're stepping back, you're moving back into the role of a teacher or a coach, an advisor, perhaps looking into some other directions, finding new passions in life. Is there a plan in place for you to get out, or is there still that part of you that wants to check in and make certain they don't go too far off the rails?
No, I think my thought is that I wanted to be here, as much as he wanted me to be here. And then, but there's other things I'd like to, I'm going to pursue. So that we're looking at. I mean, we have my ultimate vision from when I first got into this was to do Roto-Rooter and then buy commercial properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have accumulated a number of commercial properties, and I kind of like that. I kind of like, it's so we take care of that. We have our own problems there, but it's less stressful. They don't have to worry about somebody calling me 24/7, and and so that's really that's one of the areas I'm looking at going down.
Nice. So I got one final question for you.
Okay.
Tell me about this 1949 Chevy.
Oh, okay, great. I don't know where it came up with. I don't know if I sent you a picture or not, but anyway, a couple of years ago, I've been looking for the last probably 4 or 5 years for a van for an old Chevrolet panel truck, or not necessarily Chevrolet, Ford, whatever. Roto-Rooter has some great pictures of when they got started in '35 of some of these early vehicles because that was they were really leading edge in trying to offer franchises, and so I love the pictures on the old trucks, and so. And that was one of the things, kind of a retirement. Do I want to go and work on old cars? And, like most of us, we did it as kids. And so anyway, I stumbled across a really good shape 49 Chev panel truck. And so we've decaled it with the 1930s, 40s Roto-Rooter decals. That was the first series that came out. And so we take it to car shows. I drive it. Of course, it's very drivable, and so we'll take it to shows or events or things we're doing. We're gonna do a big thing over in Tupelo here next month, and I'll take it over for that. I don't think I'm going to drive it to Tupelo. That's about a 3-hour drive, but I'll probably put it on the trailer and take it over there for that.
That's awesome. It's important to have to have a passion like that you can also bring back to the business and have another reason for it and another justification for your significant other on why we're going to spend this money. I think that goes a long way.
That's it. It's something, like I said, I think it was something to keep me busy. Although I'm having nightmares from when I don't know what your story is, but mine, my first car was the family 4-door, and I was 15, and my father's solution for this was he and I towed it home and quit running, towed it home and put it in the driveway. And he called me downstairs and he said, "Son," he said, "your mother and I have decided to give you a car." I'm like, "Great. Well, where is it?" "Well, it's out in the driveway. Look out." And it's just the 64 Chevy Impala. And I'm like, "Oh, well, where's the car?" "Well, that's it." So I spent all my nickels and dimes and money and, whatever I did to rebuild an engine that I had never done before. So that's how I learned how to do auto mechanics, like most of us did in the 60s and 70s, was to, start with that way. So I did the same thing to my son, only with a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. It was one of our service trucks, and the engine finally gave out. And I said, okay, here, guess what? This is yours.
That's awesome.
And so
Well,
anyway.
Randy, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time. Your story is incredible. We don't come across somebody who's that diverse of a background and having so much fun that's doing it. So I'm going to leave it to you to say goodbye to everybody. If you have one piece of advice that you would want listeners to take away from your experiences on it, now's the time.
Probably the only thing again, thank you, but probably the only thing is that I don't know, without having, and I believe very strongly in having that kind of guiding presence of the Lord. And so without that, it'd be really tough to do what we do. So that would probably be my advice. If you're not, go tap into that. Go tap into that power base. That's a pretty crazy power base.
I agree with you 100%. Well, right. Thanks everybody. Wonderful. And thank you, Randy. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Okay. Thank you.